Hello everyone, we are live right now with Paul Martin, co-founder of Martin Charlton Communications, and he is a mentor of mine and a mentor of so many other entrepreneurs in Saskatchewan and beyond. And he's here today for, he had a little bit of time to come in and to discuss with us some of the things that have driven him to where he's at today. Let's start with your story, Paul. How did you get into all the roles that you've been? Because I grew up listening to you on the radio. I remember on the bus going to North Balfour from Sweetgrass. I listened to you on the bus back and forth on the radio, and I'm like, man, this guy has a good voice. So.
Yeah, it was radio. That's where I started, right out of high school, actually, in Weyburn, and then off to Regina, and then from there branched into other forms of media. Print with Saskatchewan Business Magazine. Mm-hmm. That led to a television show on CTV called Saskatchewan Business.
Nice.
And probably before you were born, there was a thing called The Provincial, which was an attempt by CTV. They ran an anchor in Regina and an anchor in Saskatoon, and they did a province-wide newscast, and I was a part of that. I freelanced the business stuff. I was always doing business.
Nice.
And then I came to Saskatoon to do, I was business editor of the Star Phoenix. So I had radio, television, and newspapers going on at the same time. I published a little newsletter. But it was the journalism piece that kind of gave me the name in the community.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of public speaking around the province. And something called Action Saskatchewan came along in 1999-2000, and I think that probably would be my signature piece. Mm-hmm. But it was an effort by the provincial chamber to, you have to remember, in the late 90s, Saskatchewan was a pretty difficult time economically. Mm-hmm. And people's attitudes were tough. They were really, people were not feeling very comfortable. And so the provincial chamber challenged the business community to start this, and they had a little saying. It went, "Up your attitude," and the response was, "Up yours."
Yeah.
And a few of us kind of sat down one night we were pushed a little bit by the chamber president of the day, and we wrote something called Action Saskatchewan, which became a bit of a blueprint for a conversation that took place around the province. And I would say I delivered presentations in every town you can think of, just about, probably, it was more than 100. Appearances where we would talk about this, usually organized by the chamber. But there were a few key factors in there, and one of them was we coined the phrase the growth agenda. We also coined the phrase of a scarcity mindset, and that probably turned out to be the most powerful piece of this thing. And it went like this. It said, if you're doing well, and I'm doing well, then people in the community are mad at us because we're obviously getting a bigger piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. And so what we discovered was there was a bias against success in the province, that people who were successful were becoming targets and they were the enemy. And in fact, if you stop and think about that, people who are successful are really the lifeblood of the community. And that was what we did with Action Saskatchewan, was get that conversation on the table and say that success was not a bad thing, that entrepreneurs, for example, are rare, and that you should wrap your arms around them and cultivate them and nurture them and protect them and water them. And I think that was the beginning of a long conversation here, that when Saskatchewan took off in 2005, we actually had got our mindset turned around so that we could accept success. When the province started to have economic success, we often just speculate, because it is only speculation, of what would have happened if we would have had that success without the previous conversation, without the discussion about how success was actually a good thing. We would have ended up with a lot of division in the province, I think. And I credit the chamber and the few people that I worked with in crafting this thing for having really launched a significant conversation. I learned a couple of things. One was, you can have a conversation, but boy, it's hard. I mean, we wrote so much stuff, and all those meetings, town hall meetings, and the two newspapers in the province gave us a page a week to write a subject matter, one topic every week. I did 65 pages, 65 weeks. I wrote a page for each of the papers on a specific topic about that sort of attitude thing. And among the things that Action Saskatchewan put on the agenda were, we were kind of the first guys, not to say it, but to really publicize it, that First Nations represented an untapped labor force in the province, that agriculture was underdeveloped, that we were the best in agriculture, but we were low value, not high value.
Yeah, yeah.
So we had that conversation. You saw the switch now to pulse crops,
Right.
much higher value, more value added, more livestock.
Right.
So, it was a very healthy conversation, but it had significant impact across the province. So yes, my story, how's that for 10 seconds
That's
or
a
less?
great story. Paul, with your business that you're running right now, it's all about storytelling, and how important is that to anyone's personal or corporate brand?
We always say, you probably hear it all the time, I certainly hear it all the time, our business is the best kept secret, or our community is the best kept secret.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, that's a self-inflicted wound.
Yeah.
And by definition, if you succeed commercially, you're doing something different than everybody else. So you're appealing to a marketplace, to an audience that are patronizing you. And our business, we say that you need to be able to capture the underlying vision and that story, and be able to tell it. And in today's modern digital world, it's so much easier to do. I mean, look at what we're doing right now. We're having this conversation, but as soon as you have a website, you're a publisher. Right. So even the smallest business has a website. They're a publisher. They're capable of putting video on there, audio on there, print stuff. So your radio, television, and newspapers all in your own site. And what we say in our communications firm and our PR firm is, if the newspaper delivered the same edition of the paper to your door every day, didn't change a word in it, wouldn't be very long before you weren't a subscriber. You'd give up on that paper. Well, how was your website any different? So we say you should keep your website current, and what we built is in our business is we call it a newsroom, and we have journalists who actually spend their day writing stories on behalf of clients, and we publish them on their websites in the traditional mainstream media, and also we put it onto, repurpose it for social media and that kind of stuff. So it is about every business has a story, every person has a story. We say, we will help you tell it.
Yes, I think that's key right there. That's kind of how me and Paul got to know each other. Is he heard about my story? We've seen each other at networking events. He was emceeing a few events I've been to. So I got a chance to see Paul in action at a young age on the radio, and also in my later business experiences through networking events. So it was a lot of fun doing that. Paul, let's go back into a different topic here. A lot of our viewers that watch this show, they always ask a similar question, and one of the questions is, how can I be a more confident speaker? Whether it be creating a podcast, whether it be doing a live video like this, or getting up in front of your peers and addressing a situation, or even doing a presentation.
It's a good question, and you never really get over the nerves. So just understand that. I mean, I probably made 500 presentations in my life. I still get the nerves, right? I've got about 10 of them coming up in the next month, and I'm sweating them, right? And but they ask you to stand up in front of them and say something for a reason. So believe in yourself. They do. They're asking you to come. I'm going to give you half an hour of my time, all of us, 40, 50, 80, 100 people in the room. So already there's a vote of confidence for your capability. So I find that we're probably most hardest on ourselves. And just the advice I always give my clients is, just be clear that you have a message before you start. The more prepared you are, the more confident you can be. So have some clarity in, what message am I trying to deliver? There's a story there, but there's always a moral to the story. What's the underlying piece? And so, and this little bit of advice that, I don't know, came from some politician somewhere. I said, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So say the same thing over 3 times, because then they might even actually hear your moral if you repeat it enough times. So there is some measure of experience that helps you get more confident, but clearly it's much better if you go in with some clarity and understanding of what it is I want to say. And the last thing I'll say is breathe. Breathe, because the body is driven by air, and don't be afraid to pause. And watch broadcasters like professionals. They take big pauses, and it really doesn't seem out of place.
It just seems natural.
It does.
It just flows.
And they take a lot of air in, and what we find is most people when they speak, they kind of crunch down and they don't breathe to the bottom of their lungs. And so you end up with some carbon dioxide building up the bottom of your lungs.
Yeah.
That gets into your bloodstream. Now you start to get anxious because you're feeling a little bit lightheaded. Then you breathe faster. Now you're getting to hyperventilate, right? Take a deep breath and just clear your lungs, and it's amazing what will happen. So my advice is this. Be confident, because you probably are a subject matter expert. That's why they're asking you to speak. Second, be confident and have some clarity in your message. And third, breathe.
Yes. Great advice, Paul. Let's tap into, I'm sure you've consulted a lot of entrepreneurs over your time here, and me being one of them. What is the number one question a lot of them, let's rephrase it. What is the number one problem a lot of startups go through, and what's your advice to that problem?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one, because when you're a startup, there's just so many things going on. You've got so many balls in the air. But really, as a startup, if you're going into an already established industry, you have to remember, I'm going in and I'm knocking the incumbent off the pedestal. Now, they've got history and all of that. So one of the challenges startups have is the only entry point they have is lower price. So the only way I can convince you to dump your existing supplier, who you have a relationship with, and come to me, is if I make it so attractive. Well, I probably am going to go out of business because I haven't charged enough, right? So it is trying to make sure that you actually have demand for your product, that you have some clients lined up, and that there is an appetite in the market. The incumbent, the clients are unhappy, or they're underserved, or you're bringing a new product to market that isn't already there. But if you're going in and you're just going to take on the establishment, you're going to, it's a tough role, because you really only have price to play with. You don't have track record, you don't have history, you don't have experience with that client. So all you can offer them is a lower price. And generally, about, what do they say, 60% of businesses don't make it 5 years. And they will blame it on management, undercapitalization, the sort of stuff. They all tie in together. Is that you really don't have a solid know what your customer is, and who your customer is, and what you're going to serve that makes you different. So it's about figuring out what differentiates me from the competitor, so I don't have to play with price.
Yes, absolutely. Good advice there, Paul. What drives you? What drives you to continue to do what you're doing, and to keep paving a new path for a lot of people?
I've reflected on that question a lot, and I suppose when I was young, it was about trying to make some money and be rich and all that sort of stuff. But as I got going, I realized that I spend, as you mentioned, a lot of my time today coaching CEOs, and so I was trying to rationalize that with my journalism and all of that. And as I thought it through, here's what I came to conclude. As a journalist, I never played on the field. I'm a reporter. I sit in the stands, I watch the game, I report. Now I'm a coach, and I'm still not on the field. I don't run the business for my clients. They run their businesses. I'm closer to the bench now, but I'm still not on the field. But I really, and even coach is a bad word, because it's not a correct word. Mentor might be better. Because I don't call the plays. I don't tell the business people, you do this, and you go execute it. No, it's their business. I support them. And my job is to ask questions, and to, as we like to say in tech, which is the outfit I'm involved with, Tech Canada, is we don't answer your questions, we question your answers. So you'll say, I want to do this, and I'll just probe and make sure that you're really sure that you've explored all the opportunities and the pitfalls and whatever implications come from that decision. So what drives me now, I've realized, is about, I guess I get my enjoyment, my jollies out of watching others succeed. I did that as a journalist. I was always considered to be a guy who would write about positive stuff and successes. They used to, in the newsroom, they used to call me Pollyanna, because I had rose-colored glasses all the time, and that was not in a happy sense. They would say that. But, I didn't subscribe to that traditional media view of if it bleeds, it leads. I always thought, if bankruptcy is a story, and it is, then success is equally a story. And, not everyone in the industry shared my viewpoint, but I realized that if I can help you succeed, that's where I get my satisfaction. And I work with, about 50 CEOs, fairly high-powered CEOs in the province, and well-known ones. And where I get the satisfaction is coming from helping them deal with issues, get over problems, provide a different perspective because they're in the trees,
Yeah.
and I sometimes remind them what the forest looks like.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that advice there, Paul. For anyone who's watching right now, this is obviously a free show. It's all about what Paul's talking about, how he started his career, and it's all about just spreading a positive message, and just showing you guys that we're all just people just like you who are watching. We've been through different stories, but at the end of the day, we're just like everyone who's watching. So that's why we're sharing our the things that we've gone through, so we can help anyone who's watching. Paul, let's go back to that point right there. Your mentors growing up, your mentors getting into the business field, how important has that been to your success?
Yeah. I had a couple of mentors in journalism, but they were more like managers who would just train you. But I think I found my inspiration from the people I wrote about. And because I've been in journalism and business journalism in the province for north of 40 years now, I had an opportunity to interview all the legends that formed the business community, names you probably never even heard of. I was invited to write a book on the Hill family, for example. Now, they're probably the prominent business family in the province. They're more well-known in Regina than Saskatoon.
Yeah.
I was sort of the unofficial corporate biographer of George Solomon. There's a name you never heard of, probably, but his daughter is the lieutenant governor right now. So he was one of the legends in the business world, and I had an opportunity to interview a lot of the old guard, like the guys who built IPSCO. I wrote a book on IPSCO. The one thing about journalism is it gives you entrance into places. I got into places, and it allowed me to travel. I traveled around the world following business people from here, politicians from here. I've been in China 10 times. I climbed the Great Wall of China 5 times. Wow. I mean, it's and being able to go over and see that kind of stuff, and traveling with one time I went with Mike Harcourt when he was still the mayor of Vancouver. He went on to be premier of BC, and we went into Hong Kong and into Guangzhou and saw the transformation in China 25 years ago that led to all the growth in Saskatchewan 10 years ago, where the people moved from the farm. 500 million people moved from the farm to the city in China. And they started working in the factories. They had real money. They wanted more food. They wanted better food. Pressure came on to farmers in North America to grow more food. Potash was needed to grow more food. We ended up spending $15 or $20 billion on potash mines in this province. And I saw that in its very formative stages 25 years ago. So, I've been kind of lucky that way. And being able to tour around and having firsthand access to a lot of the business leaders in the province, those were probably more inspirational to me than any individual.
Wow, so that's pretty cool. His profession allowed him to go all over the world, different countries, been to China, like you said, 10 times, and he's seen how internationally the business there can affect our economy here, and China is a perfect example. So, Paul, I know you're very busy. We won't keep you too long, but just one last question. Any last words of encouragement to any of you out there, whether it be through personal development or to be as a startup entrepreneur, whoever's watching, and any words that you can do to encourage them to keep going?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is just be a sponge for information. And when you consume information, part of it can be news or even just what you're doing here, try and analyze it a little bit. Be discriminating and say, well, what's that really mean? I think back even to that experience I told you about in China. I watched 500 million people, over a 20-year period, but where I was at the very formative stages. To give you an idea of how dramatic it was. The mayor of Guangzhou, I had to sit down with him, and the mayor of Vancouver asked him, what's your biggest problem? And he said, I have the city cordoned off by the military right now. And I said, why would you do that? And he said, because they're moving from the farm into the city at a rate of 6,000 a day, and I can't accommodate them. So I've closed off the city till I can build housing. Well, that's monumental, right? And it didn't twig for me that really meant 10 years from now, Saskatchewan's agriculture industry is going to be on a rocket ride. If I'd have been smart and I would have digested and analyzed that better, I probably would have bought a farm, and I probably wouldn't be talking to you today because I'd be down in Hawaii enjoying the sunrise, the sun, And so I look back and I think I saw some really fascinating things in my life, and I didn't fully grasp what they meant. So I would say, dig deeper.
Yeah.
You know, digest that information and
Yeah.
think harder. And you know, the stuff that I'm talking about right now, you know, that you and I have had the conversation, I think one of the areas for real opportunity in the province is I'd love to see a private sector emerge in the First Nations community. I think that's an untapped piece. And I understand that that's a difficult leap, but
Yes.
you know, if I could leave anything behind, that would be one that I think would be great.
Absolutely.
And if I could, you know, among the other things I left behind was sort of a better understanding of Saskatchewan's international connections, how much success we've had on the world stage. People here don't really understand that. I got the University of Regina. What a magnificent story of how it was in China 10 years before China opened the doors to the West.
Wow.
The University of Regina, a little university. The president of China, I remember this day, I was a journalist covering it, flew to Regina to get an honorary degree at the U of R. Protesters all over in the U of R stood strong and said, no, this is important. He flew in on the government jet, like Air Force One, China's version of it. 747, it took every square inch of runway in Regina, and we all were out at the airport watching this thing land. Would it actually get stopped in time? And he came, and he went to the university, and he got this honorary degree. China was still a closed country at that point.
Wow.
I mean, and we don't really realize how strong the connections are and the stuff we've achieved. And if there's any problem Saskatchewan has, it's this hiding their light under a bushel and not believing in themselves. We're pretty darn successful. We've had some really remarkable stories. And and just because you're from here doesn't mean you're at the end of the universe. In fact, you're maybe at the beginning of the universe.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Paul. Hopefully you guys got a lot of value from that conversation. I know I always get inspired when I hear this guy. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on here.
No, thank you. And listen, as a guy who came out of journalism, to watch you doing this broadcast, not bad. You're running a media outlet. Here you are, your own little media outlet. It's doable today.
Yes, absolutely. So all you need is a phone, you need a Wi-Fi connection, and a Facebook. You can be live in live channels anywhere, and as well as YouTube as well. So, thank you, Paul. Hope you guys got a lot of value from that today. You can subscribe to my Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I'm pretty much on every social network you can think of. And we will see you all again very soon. Thank you, Paul.
Nice t-shirt.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.